3, 2, 1.
I've come to the Arctic Ocean near the North Pole on a vital mission. Here, a handful of scientists are braving brutal conditions in their search for answers about climate change.
What do you reckon, Helen? How much further?
Pretty close, it's coming here. There we go.
Whoa. All right. Woo!
Well, in the past year since the Deepwater Horizon catastrophe, I've spent countless hours and days here in the Gulf working to remind people of the tremendous crisis that oil spill caused and make sure that even though in many cases it's out of sight, it doesn't become out of mind.
That's my grandfather, Jacques Cousteau, and it was someone that inspired me growing up very much in all the work that I do. And he started out not interested in oceans, not with a passion at all for oceans. He actually wanted to be a pilot in the French naval aviation program. And it was a car accident where he broke his back on the windy roads of southern France that dashed his dreams of being a pilot. He was washed out of that program and was told to swim in the Mediterranean every day to rehabilitate himself. And his captain, a man named Philippe Cousteau, who my father, Philippe Cousteau Sr., was named after, and thus so am I, he gave him a pair of goggles. This was a very hip, cutting-edge technology at the time. You had to pretty much home make these with ground-down glass and old tires to wrap around them and make the straps. And my grandfather was fascinated with this world. But if there's anything that I believe my grandfather stands for, it is innovation. And that legacy stands for innovation of Cousteau. And he saw problems throughout his life, and he sought to find innovative solutions to those problems. I had to share this with you. This is one of my favorites. Spot the hidden history lesson here. My grandfather always told me that the world is changing drastically. And it wasn't until he came back in the 1960s from expedition after 20 years of his work and said it had changed so much from the early days in the 40s in the Red Sea and the Mediterranean. He came back from expedition, he said, it's no longer about discovery, it is about conservation. Let's remember, let's think back a little bit. In 0 AD, there were about 200 million people on this planet. Almost 2,000 years later, in 1900, we had 1.6 billion people on this planet. This year, we passed 7 billion people, and by the middle of this century, it's estimated by the United Nations we'll have anywhere between 9 and 9.5 billion people on this planet. So if you look at that curve, it should actually be like a bell curve. It's a pretty incredible increase in the last 100 years of population. Now, what happens when you shove too many people into a bank vault? You know, you have 1 or 2 people, they can probably last a couple days, right? If you have too many people in there, the oxygen runs out. And I got to tell you, folks, we're running out of oxygen. And by oxygen, I mean natural resources. And we are piling more and more people on this planet, and the status quo just is incapable of keeping up with the challenges we face. Fundamentally, what we need is a social and society behavior shift. And the only way we can do that, I believe, is to empower young people. If you think about the last time you saw a billboard that said something you didn't agree with, did you go, I'm convinced, I'm completely going to change my mind now thanks to that billboard or thanks to that public service announcement? Probably not. Adults are very hard to affect change. Young people are much easier, and they're engaged, they're already fired up, and you wouldn't believe the incredible power that young people have not only to grow older and affect change, but to influence adults now.
Traveling around and dealing in conservation, there's a lot of bad news these days. There's a lot of bad news about the decline of fisheries and coral reefs and the oceans. And I get frustrated because I think to myself how unfair it is that my children will never be able to experience the things that even I saw 20 years ago, and certainly that my father and grandfather experienced all those decades ago. And yet when I come out to Cabo Pulmo and I see the potential, I see the hope that this place represents, the fact that we can come together as communities and restore nature and offer to our children and our posterity hope for the future, that we can restore, we can revitalize the environment. It's these kind of moments that make it all worthwhile and absolutely spectacular.